Greetings and welcome back to this podcast and video series. I am Drake Woods, and this is my series entitled A New Leviathan. And in it, we are going to be discussing various political issues that affect not just America, but the world at large. And for today's episode, I think it's only fitting that we start with the issue that I would currently consider to be the most important and the most significant to American politics. And that is the issue of the border crisis, the issue of immigration. Both of the last two administrations of the United States presidency have put a very big emphasis on immigration. When Donald Trump ran for president in 2016, the issue of immigration and his idea of the wall became commonly associated with his movement and his image. In fact, while he did talk about some other issues, it was pretty much his sort of almost like a one-issue candidacy. It was a very big thing that he often honed in on. Similarly, President Biden would, of course, naturally sort of want to constantly attack that view if he is to be Trump's rival. But interestingly enough, President Biden has also taken an unusual approach to sort of avoiding the issue sometimes. And that is because we have been grappling with a very severe border crisis, and the way that President Joe Biden has handled it can only be described as a massive misstep. The influx of migrants at the southern border has reached unprecedented levels, and we have thousands of people crossing into the U.S. every day. Immigration has risen rapidly under President Biden's watch, and while many try to downplay the issue, the statistics show that it is simply undeniable. If you look at this graph here, we can see it outlines the immense increase in illegal immigrants seen entering the United States each year, or just this is migrant border apprehensions and encounters made by our Federal Immigration Patrol each year. In 2021, we saw about 1.9 million. In 2022, we saw about 2.7 million. And in 2023, we saw 3.2 million. This year, 2024, so far alone, in the months that we've had, we've already seen 1.7 million come in. In just half the year of 2024, we have almost matched the entire first year of Biden's presidency, showing that as time goes on, this issue is getting worse and worse. In fact, by the millions, we're seeing almost an additional million amount of border apprehensions increase each year under Biden's watch, under Biden's presidency. This surge can only be seen to be a result of his immigration policies, which are notably lax and have sent a message to the world and to the migrants, most importantly, that anyone can enter the country illegally, and it is highly likely that they will get away without facing any real consequences. And compared to the previous years and previous administration of President Trump, or even past Democratic administrations, this is huge. Since taking office, Biden has rolled back a bunch of the former immigration policies of President Trump that were a lot stricter. Most notably, this includes something called the Migrant Protection Protocols, the MPP, as well as the policy of Remain in Mexico. Both of these outlined strict standards for immigrants, particularly Remain in Mexico, which stated that they could not be allowed into the United States if their asylum request had not been approved yet. They had to stay where they had originally came from until it was actually approved that they should actually be in the United States. And these were put in place to deter illegal immigration and just establish reasonable standards that would help protect the nation and maintain some order. And while there were some flaws with his presidency and goals that I do not think were met, President Trump's policies, they did indeed correlate with much lower levels of illegal immigration into America. But by scrapping them, Biden has created chaos and incentivized a lot more people to make the dangerous journey to the United States. We can just see this simply through looking at these graphs defining the amount of border apprehensions that occurred under President Trump, and we can see that they are much lower. In 2017, for example, we only saw about 300,000 border apprehensions of migrants caught trying to cross the border illegally. In 2018, that was only about 400,000, and even in 2019, it was only about 800,000. We went from 300,000 to 3 million across the 5 years from 2017 to 2023. That is an absolutely insane increase. And that can only be seen to be the result of incredibly lax border policies under President Biden. And additionally, his rhetoric, it has also played a significant role in fueling this crisis. Just as important as actual policies are, it is also important to notice the impact that how a president promotes a certain ideology on an issue will affect how people think and, more importantly, how people act. Interestingly enough, it has been seen that President Trump actually didn't get to fulfill many of the policies that he designed to reduce immigration. Oftentimes, it was solely his rhetoric on a tougher and more law-abiding border that helped decrease the amount of illegal immigrants trying to cross the border. And during Biden's campaign, he made this very big message that he promised to be a lot more welcoming to migrants and that he wanted to provide a pathway to citizenship for those already living in the U.S. illegally, having illegally entered the country, basically just washing away the fact that they were once an illegal migrant to the United States. And this message, along with the rollback of Trump's policies, have created this sort of sense of opportunity for those who want to try to come here and cross the border. They think that they will easily be able to get away with it and that President Biden won't really put the foot down, as he has shown both through his actions and said both through his words. As a result, we have seen a record number of unaccompanied children and families arriving at the border, and this is putting a very significant strain on our national resources and our Border Patrol's personnel. And although he has been forced to acknowledge the crisis at the border, because let's say this, it would be basically absolutely ridiculous to try to downplay it, he and his administration have failed to actually do anything effective to address this crisis. The overcrowded and the very unsanitary conditions in the migrant detention facilities have drawn a lot of criticism, not just from Biden's political rivals in the Republican Party, but even some more moderate elements of the Democratic Party are beginning to state that this does not look like a reasonable solution. The amount of illegal immigrants that we are seeing now has simply gotten to an unprecedented level, and it's worse than anything seen even under the Obama administration. We've heard that children are being held in overcrowded tents for very long periods, and there have been a lot of reports of neglect surfacing over the sheer amount of people that are being brought in, which simply cannot be handled in these areas. The conditions are unacceptable and ironic for Biden's rhetoric about being nicer to immigrants than Trump, who he oftentimes called draconian for simply wanting some more security and better policies to reduce the flow of illegal immigration, is oftentimes very inhumane looking. Yet, the Biden administration has been slow to actually address and rectify the situation in any way. And it's also beginning to become a situation to a level never seen before, with the incidence of illegal immigrants committing criminal activity. And this is more than just simple incidents of, say, theft or drug abuse. We are seeing the death of American citizens to illegal immigrants, when liberals would rather protect those who illegally came into this country than actual American citizens who they took an oath to protect. We saw the death of Laken Riley in 2024. Even after her death, an act was passed where 37, note only 37 out of, I believe, almost 200 Democrats who sit in the House of Representatives, actually agreed with all Republicans that migrants who commit theft or burglary should be mandated to be detained. I mean, what kind of country are we coming to where it is a controversial statement to say if an illegal immigrant commits a burglary or steals something, they should indeed be detained like a criminal? It's incredibly bizarre what future we are coming to. And that's not anywhere near enough to come to a consensus to address this issue. In fact, the wildest thing of all is that during President Biden's notable State of the Union, where after being begged to by Republican congressmen who brought up the issue, he reluctantly did bring up Laken Riley, although he, as he is known to have many gaffes, including his interesting "America can be defined in a single word" stuttering comment, and his most unusual recent comment about his uncle being a victim of cannibals or something like that. He accidentally called her Lincoln Riley, even though this should be a major political issue that he should be reasonably thinking about quite a bit as a president. And the wildest thing of all is that while the Republicans criticized President Biden for mispronouncing the name of the girl involved in one of the biggest political issues of our time, he was actually criticized by Democrats in Congress for not being liberal enough. That is, he called Riley's killer, who is believed to have family ties with a Venezuelan gang, an illegal immigrant, and not their own little politically correct term for those who break our laws and commit murders. That is, undocumented immigrants. It's very politically incorrect to call a murderer an illegal immigrant. You should always use the term undocumented, according to them at least. And this is not the first issue that we've seen. We've seen the death of Molly Tibbetts in 2018, Catherine Steinley in 2015, 2 Sacramento City policemen in 2014, and the death of Jamiel Shaw in 2008. And each time, liberals will try to come up with some sort of excuse for this to say, well, it's an isolated incident, it doesn't prove anything at large. Or the fact that, well, I'm sure this could have happened if they were an illegal or a citizen. But the fact is simple. We have seen a repeated pattern where illegal immigrants who should not realistically be in our country, and most notably in the example of Riley's killer, should have been turned away at the border when they were discovered to have illegally immigrated to the United States engaging in criminal activity. Because it only makes sense. If someone was willing to break the laws to enter the country illegally without going through proper systems, then it would make sense to think that they would also have less of a moral compass and have less of a bias towards committing further criminal activity. And his handling of the border crisis has also faced criticism for its lack of transparency and accountability. In an issue that is causing young Americans to lose their lives at the hands of illegal immigrant killers, it is definitely something that you should have a lot of transparency about and a lot of accountability for those involved through the Border Patrol agencies. And we have seen this unusual and bizarre occurrence many times, both through Biden himself, known for oftentimes saying statements that don't really make sense, his press secretaries, Jen Psaki and Karine Jean-Pierre, and the Vice President, Kamala Harris, all of whom who have previously said things that many people saw as confusing or not very transparent, which is not a standard that we should set for government officials. And this lack of transparency has only been raising more questions and concerns about what is really going down at the border and how this situation is even being handled. How are Venezuelan gang members getting allowed by the Border Patrol to pass by their centers and enter the domestic United States? In addition to this humanitarian crisis, there are also plenty of concerns about the safety and security of the U.S., as I mentioned earlier. With all these sudden influx of people, the Border Patrol's resources are being stretched thin, as Border Patrol officers have repeatedly testified. This is allowing for, of course, potential criminals and those with malicious intentions to enter the country undetected. And furthermore, most ironically, considering the big emphasis that the Democrats often put in their campaigns on how they responded to the coronavirus, the uncontrolled flow of migrants is also possessing a significant threat to public health. There have been multiple reports of COVID-19 outbreaks in detention facilities, and ironically, again, with how much the Democratic Party really put a big emphasis on ensuring proper quarantine measures during the pandemic of 2020, which isn't necessarily something I disagree with, because I do think that stopping the coronavirus is important, but I do think this is a very ironic thing. There have been reports that there are little to no testing or quarantine measures in place when COVID-19 outbreaks in the migrant facilities. It's an unusual double-sided coin that they seem to care a lot about the coronavirus when it doesn't involve illegal immigrants, but when it begins to spread in migrant facilities, they don't bother to put in significant quarantine measures to ensure that it will stop the spread. And in conclusion, it's clear that Biden's handling of the border crisis has simply just been a failure. These open-door policies and these lack of transparency and this terrible response to this situation has not only caused chaos in the border, but put the safety and security of us, the American people, at risk. And we need to take an immediate action to address this crisis and implement more effective immigration policies to prevent a repeat of this situation in the future. And I always like to end off with a statement about sort of why I called this podcast a new Leviathan. Simply put, a new Leviathan is based off the idea originally proposed by Thomas Hobbes that the people and government of a society should be comparable to a Leviathan. That is just in general a generic term for something that is very, very large to the point where it is often seen as being composed of many multiple moving parts working together to create something larger. This is a mindset that liberals and left-wingers have abandoned in modern American society. The problem is that with all of this occurring, we are simply seeing a massive amount of ignorance coming from the left wing, particularly their current leader. That would, of course, be President Biden, as he is the member of the major left-wing party in the United States, which currently controls the presidency, the Senate, most of the courts, and many other aspects of our government. For this reason, it can simply be seen that it is not conducive to a harmonious society that works together with a strong and powerful government that protects the people in exchange for people giving some of their rights up. That is the social contract Hobbes proposed. And while, of course, Hobbes had a different mindset than we do today, he did have a lot of wisdom regarding the simple and basic fact that liberals cannot accept. They put too much of an emphasis on absolute individual rights, the idea that these illegal immigrants deserve the absolute individual right to come into our country with no security measures whatsoever to ensure that they do not have a criminal record, that they will be conducive to society, or to try to discover why so many people are not willing to simply go through the legal processes that are needed to enter this country safely and ensure that for the greatest good of society over simply individual rights of illegal immigrants, that the American nation can stay safe with no issues of crime, with no issues of dwindling our country's resources, attempting to address a massive wave of immigration that probably should not even be happening. It simply is something that shows that the liberals are ignorant of this crisis. They wish to distract from it and claim that they are bringing forth solutions, even though simply by looking at very basic statistics saying how many illegal immigrants have been spotted, and those are just the ones that are spotted, of course, trying to cross our border illegally per year, we can see that each year of Biden's presidency, it is just spiking more and more. And if this trend continues, if somehow we get a president in the future who would agree with this view and allow a situation like this to occur again, it will only get worse and worse, as we will have an increasingly large population of people that are completely unmanageable. Even if we use the liberals' term that they claim that does indeed make these people sound better, undocumented immigrants, that shows the basic problem with this. The government has no documents on them. The government has no idea how many of these people truly exist. We can only estimate. We don't really even know where many of them are. And that is how crimes like these and many other negative aspects, whether it is a murder or whether it is even small crimes that all denigrate society, we simply have no idea what is going on when we let so many people into our country who are not under the government's watchful eye. That is not a Leviathan. That is a Leviathan that has been blinded and stripped of its power over its sovereignty and its people by allowing people to be in our country that we simply do not have the proper security and safety measures put on to ensure that all of society remains stable. To put simply, we need action on this crisis because I believe it is the current issue that has the greatest risk to American society. And it shows just how far the left has shifted. Even if you went 30 years ago to, say, the 1990s or something, it would probably outrage most people on both the mainstream American right and the mainstream American left to say that in the future, America could see as many as 3 million people enter the country illegally in 1 year. And of course, that's probably not even an accurate number. That's just the ones that Border Patrol has reported. It would be met with outrage on both sides of the issue, with them saying, well, that sounds absolutely terrible. But now we have a left that tries to downplay it or tries to sometimes even tell us that all 3 million people illegally entering the country in 1 year is a good thing. It's simply showing that this issue is something that is the biggest issue currently, and it is the biggest threat to American stability as a whole. We cannot be a nation if we simply let down our guard and simply let down our laws in the name of a liberal idea of, well, we need to be nice and welcoming to these people. We can be welcoming, but we also need to have laws and safety in place to ensure that we don't let people in that will be harmful to our nation as a whole. Perhaps we need to put less of an emphasis on welcoming these illegal immigrants and more of an emphasis on welcoming our own citizens into a society that is actually safe and one where we actually prioritize the lives and stability of our own citizens over whatever mess the left has created at our border situation. To end off simply, I'd just like to state that we cannot be a nation, and we cannot be most certainly a Leviathan nation, unless we all work together in society to establish a social contract where some people agree to waive their rights in order to, as a whole, benefit our security and our stability and our quality of life. So, thank you very much for watching this newest edition of A New Leviathan.